سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى طاعتك أجمعين وعلى آله الإكرام الإبرار وأصحابه نجوم الهدى ومن اتبعهم وأحبهم بالإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Inshallah, tonight we already started Surah Yusuf, and it's the portion of Surah Yusuf which is in juz number 12 that has been recited. So today we'll start from that portion of Surah Yusuf which starts from juz number 13, and also the full surah of Rahad, which is 13th surah, and also Surah Ibrahim, which is 14th surah. That will be all recited inshallah. So just a brief background of Surah Yusuf. This is the only surah which, there are different surahs and in the name of different prophets, like Surah Nuh, Surah Ibrahim, Surah Hud. Many chapters are in the name of the prophets, but in none of the chapters the whole story of the Prophet alayhi salam has been narrated in a narrative way, in a lyrical way, in a story type. None of the chapters describes of any of the Prophet's stories, except this is the only chapter in which there is no mention of how Yusuf alayhi salam, he called the people to the oneness of Allah and to believe in the day of judgment, and did some of them believed and some of them didn't believe, and then the punishment or the torment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came. There is nothing of that sort. This is just a story of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam about his life. So this is the difference, but this gives us a lot of lessons. Some of them, first of all, this, as we see that the Quran's, the order, we read so far the Madanian surahs, Baqarah, Ali Imran, Maida, Nisa, Anam, and then we go into the Makkan life, and these surahs which we are reciting for last couple of nights and will continue to recite, they have been revealed in the last 3 years of the Makkan life, in the late Makkan life. So this surah also has been revealed, Surah Yusuf, in the late Makkan life after Surah Hud. It has a commanding narrative, as I told. It's so lyrical at times, because it's like somebody has calculated that how many scenes are there. If you see the drama, there is one scene, then another scene comes. There are 27 scenes in this surah. Like how the Yusuf alayhi salam comes and describes his dream to his father, and then the next, how his brothers, step-brothers, they come to Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam, who is father of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, and they persuade him to let him go with them so that they can play with him. So there are 27 scenes, and it's full of dialogues, one after the other. That's how it's Ahsanul Qasas. So there are so many lessons in this surah. The researchers have determined the time of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. The time is determined with reference to Hazrat Isa alayhi salam's birth, right? So they have come to the conclusion that it is about 1600 years before the Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam was born. That is the time of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. Yusuf alayhi salam, in this surah, we see that his character, his patience, the way he forgives his brothers, this is a forgiveness. And his dreams, he saw the dream that 11 stars and a moon, they are prostrating before him. So this was a big blessing. And now, but he has to go through so many tests. He was in the well, then he became a slave, then he went into the prison, and from the prison he comes out. So this surah also tells us about the complexities of life, that you have to go through many different hoops and loops in life, but you have to be patient about it. Patience and full confidence and full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tawakkal Allah. And sabr. These are the two main qualities of the personality of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam that made him succeed so much. See, we see that unexpected changes in the fortune. One moment he is living at home, The next moment he is in a dark well. One moment he is enjoying a life in a palace, in royal palace. He was bought by by Aziz Misr, right? He grew up. He was in the palace. The other moment he is in the prison. Right next moment he is in the prison. One moment a prisoner, the next moment he comes out from the prison, he becomes a prince. So technically, although he was a treasurer or a finance minister, you can say, in today's democracy, but technically he was ruling the whole Egypt. He had all the authority over whatever he wanted to do. So that's how much Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the authority and place in this dunya also. Because we see in Surah Baqarah, there is one ayah number 216, that really talks about this. The whole situation is summed up in that ayah really well. That we see that when we see the end of the story, Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, it's so good that he becomes a prince. He reunites with his family, and they see all his success in life. But before that, we see that the story is tragic. That his brothers are betraying him. They his brothers are showing him such a cold shoulder. They put him in the well. He's becomes a slave. He goes into the prison. All those things are not pleasing, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Baqarah, verse number 216, sometimes you may dislike something that is good for you. Because if Yusuf alayhi salam doesn't go through this path, he cannot become where he was, right? He could not reach that goal. So he had to go through that stages. So sometimes in life, when you pass through the trials and tribulations, that is, you may dislike it, but they're good for you because they raise your station. They give you sabr, and you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that raises you up. So the verse is, sometimes you may dislike something that is good for you, and sometimes you may like something that is bad for you. Only Allah knows the whole truth, not you. So the whole truth lies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, as this story is telling, because this came in the late Makkan life, because all the stories, they have a correlation with the life of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Siratul Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as this story came in the last years of the Makkan life, in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has made all his arguments, he had talked about the oneness of Allah, the Ba'sa Ba'dal Maut, resurrection when you are dead, and you will be held accountable for your deeds, Yawm al-Qiyamah. But people are not believing in a big number. So that is the time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is narrating this story to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that look how many hoops Yusuf alayhi salam went through, but finally he was successful. The end was really good. So this story also almost end of the Makkan life. So this is giving a light that now the time will start, the victory will start. Your preaching, your struggle is going to bring fruits. The surah was quietly foretelling the victory of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just as Yusuf alayhi salam succeeded against his brothers. Prophet alayhi wasallam would soon succeed against the Quraysh. The Quraysh were also almost kind of brothers. They were cousins in the tribe. So they were the staunch opponents of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as Yusuf alayhi wasallam, he became successful against his brothers, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will also be victorious against the Quraysh. One more lesson, as I told, when life gets tough and you suffer trials and unfair treatments at the hands of those from whom you expect the least. Look, you expect from your brothers that they're helpful, right? Some tribulation comes, you have some trial in life, you are in a difficult time, your brothers will help you. But look at the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, that instead of, standing by him, they went against him. They gave him so much, troubles, difficulty in life. So even then, Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, he said, La tasriba alaykumul yawm. I have nothing to do against you. And the same thing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he conquered Makkah, Fatatul Makkah happened in 8th Hijrah, same words Quran uses. This is Quran, both things are in the Quran. The same words as Yusuf alayhi salam uses, La tasriba alaykumul yawm. His brothers asked, when he met them, and he said that, what did you do to Yusuf alayhi salam? This is the Quran. When they reached, and when he, at the end, we all know the story. So when he told them that, do you know what did you do to Yusuf? That's how he asked the question. He didn't say, I am Yusuf, and you're my brothers and you did this to me. He just asked, do you remember what did you do to Yusuf? And they looked at him. Oh, really? Are you Yusuf? Nobody else knows. So then they were scared that what kind of treatment they will get from him. But he said, La tasriba alaykum al-yawm. There will be nothing against you today. You are free. Same thing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is in Quran. La tasriba alaykum al-yawm antumut tulaqa. You are free. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you are free. Their name was Tulaqa. The people who accepted Islam at that time, Fatal Makkah, they are known as Tulaqa. Tulaqa means freed. So most of the surah we have recited yesterday, but today we will start from this. وَمَا أُبَرِّيُ نَفْسِي. This is Yusuf alayhi salam. I don't hold anything in any power with myself, but all the powers lie with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مَا أُبَرِّيُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. Like my nafs always tells me to do the bad. إِلَّا مَا رَحِمَ رَبِّي. Except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful to me. Inna Rabbi Ghafurur Rahim. And the surah continues then. وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Yusuf alayhi salam was given that he was appointed. قَالَ جَعَلْنِي عَلَى خَزَائِنِ الْأَرْضِ. He was appointed the finance minister of the Egypt, or the treasurer, or you can say. And then it continues. Then Yusuf's brothers, they visit Egypt because then there was a famine and they cross from Canaan, which is Palestine. They go to Egypt and they ask for the food and all the story we know. Then Yusuf's brothers, they visit Egypt. They're overjoyed. Yusuf's brothers are overjoyed with the treatment that he didn't charge them much, but he loaded their saddle bags, the bags which come on both sides of the camel. He loaded them with the corn. So they were very happy. And he asked them, he took a promise from them that they will bring his real brother, which is his name was Binyamin, that they will convince their father, Yaqub alayhi salam, that they will send Binyamin next time. So the Quran talks about the story in detail. Then Yaqub reluctantly sends Binyamin because he know they promise the same as for Yusuf alayhi salam. Send Yusuf with us. We will be very careful about him. We will not let him astray, and we will bring him back. But again they asked that you send Binyamin with us. So he was very reluctant. But then finally he agreed, and he said that only if some tragedy comes, otherwise I'm going to make sure that you bring him back. And it continues then. And then we see that Yaqub alayhi salam, he also advises them that when you go and enter into the city in Egypt, go from the different doors. Don't go from one door. So this is his advice how to avoid the evil eye. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there is one hadith tayyiba, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, an evil eye can drive a person into a grave and a camel into a cooking pot. So we should be careful we should always get the refuge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from an evil eye. May Allah save us all. Then the story continues how Yusuf gets to keep his brother. We know that they put the Mayring ball, they put in one of the saddle bags, and then they announced that somebody has stolen that our Mayring ball, and that showed up in the saddle bag of Sayyidina Binyamin, and they were kept that way. Then the story continues, and the brothers plead in for Binyamin's freedom, but he doesn't agree. Then the brothers, they return to Yaqub alayhi salam, and they give the news that we are unable to, we couldn't keep our promise, but you can ask all the people who went to Egypt that this is not our fault, and Yusuf alayhi salam has kept him, and he has asked us to bring you. So then Yaqub alayhi salam, he cries for the loss of his sons. So this shows the love of these are the human feelings. Some people I see that, my brother recently passed away. He was young, 2 years younger than me, 44 years old in January. And it was like some people, they just comment, I couldn't understand, but the answer came from the Quran. How sabr could be, how patient one could be more than Yaqub alayhi salam. But look how much he cried for his son, right? he cried so much that he developed cataract in both of his eyes. So early, premature cataract he developed, right? His eyes became white. He cried so much for the loss. Although he's a pagambar, he bears a sabr. So even if you cry on your some loss, before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's perfect. It's a human feeling. Some people, they don't even, they're so hardened, their heart is so hard, they don't even let you cry on these things. But we follow the Quran. Quran is the best guidance, right? So Yaqub alayhi wasalam, he had a deep sorrow. He says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I am merely complaining to Allah of my deep sorrow and sadness. These are the words used by the Quran, that he was in so much sorrow. And because when you are in deep sorrow and you're in sadness, you return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is one of the ways you become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some death happens some significant other dies in your family, that brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is as the Yaqub alayhi salam. Then the great forgiveness happens, as I mentioned before, that he forgives his brothers. La tasriba alaykum al-yawm. Then Yusuf alayhi salam, this is the famous dua of Yusuf alayhi salam, कि रब्बी कद आतैतनी मिनल मुल्की व अल्लमतनी मिन तावील अहादीस फातिर अस्समावाति वल अर्द अंत वली फिद दुनिया वल आखिरा तवफ़नी मुस्लिमन व अलहिकनी बिस्सालिहीन. That Yusuf alayhi salam, he prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he thanks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you are so kind to me that you gave me the kingdom. You made me almost the king of Egypt. Practically he was the king of Egypt. Wa allamtani min ta'wil al-ahadith, and you gave me the knowledge. Most of the Mufassirun, they have interpreted this as you gave me the knowledge that how can I interpret the dreams. But I think this, the one explanation I read, that gives more meaning to it. Just interpreting dreams is not he's a Pagambar Yusuf alayhi salam. It's not according to his status. But we see that how Yusuf alayhi salam, he managed that a famine is coming in 7 years, and how he saved the crops for the next 7 years. And all the people from other countries, they were coming and getting the food from Egypt. So this shows how much problem solving skills he has. How much in today's modern world we can say problem solving skills. His thought process was at that level that he could solve the complicated problems. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him. Ta'wil al-ahadith. That problem solving skills at his height. Fatir as-samawati wal ard. He says, Anta waliyya fid dunya fil akhirah. Oh Allah, you are my protector in this world and the hereafter. Tawaffani musliman. Oh Allah, keep me Muslim. Muslim means keep me submitted to you. Keep me in your obedience. Keep me on your path, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, until I die. This is the dua of Yusuf alayhi salam. Wa alhiqni bis salihin, and let me go into the salihin. Let me go and meet the salihin. Let me be in the company of the pious and salih people. So this is the dua of the Anbiya. We should also always look forward for the neek people, the righteous people. And the last portion of this surah that talks about the creative power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ إِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ مَا كَانَ حَدِيثٍ يُفْتَرَى وَلَكِنْ تَصْدِيقَ الَّذِي بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ وَتَفْصِيلَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ وَهُدًى وَرَحْمَةً لِقَوْمٍ يُؤْمِنُونَ. That this is Quran. مَا كَانَ حَدِيثًا يُفْتَرَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is not a fabricated story. This is not a made up story, Yusuf alayhi salam. وَلَكِنْ تَصْدِيقَ الَّذِي بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ. But I am certifying this story. This is the true story. Allah's words. وَتَفْصِيلَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, and everything has been described in detail. And what is this? This is hudan, guidance, warahma, mercy. For who? Only for the people, liqawmin yu'minun, the people who believe. The next two surahs which will be recited today, just a brief introduction of them. Surah Mubarakah Rahad. This is after Surah Yusuf. The literal meaning of Rahad is thunder, thunderclap. And why this surah is called Rahad? Because the word comes in the surah, Yusabbihu Rahad. We see that everything, ma fi samawati wal ard, Yusabbihu lillahi. Whatever is in, even the birds, the animals, Quran says that they even do the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything, solid, living, non-living, animal kingdom, plant kingdom, everything, water, air, you name it, any material, any mode, any medium, they do the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Quran also says it in another. This has come many times, that everything yusabbihu lillahi ma fi samawati. I think 7 or 8 surahs they start with this yusabbihu lillahi ma fi samawati wal ard. They will come at the end. 7 surahs they start with this word yusabbihu lillahi ma fi samawati wa ma fil ard. Whatever is in heaven and earth, they do the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the human being? Nothing. All the creature of Allah is doing tasbih. And another, I am remembering, I don't know the exact Arabic, but it says that the birds, they also do the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wala la yafka tasbihahum. You don't understand their tasbih. So Surah Mubarakah Rahad also, this surah, this is also coming in the late Makkan time. Probably when the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has gone to Taif, and when he came back, the last 2 years, this surah came to. Because this is concluding all the message that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has conveyed his message. He did his best. He recited. He told them about the arguments of the Tawheed, arguments of oneness of Allah, being himself being messenger, and the day of the judgment, that you will be resurrected. So many examples he gave that you will be resurrected. Still they are not believing. So now the time is coming for the final decision, which will be the migration to Medina, Taiba, and then they will get their lesson in Badr, in Uhud, in Khandaq, and Fatah Makkah, and all those ghazwas. They will be. The Makkans, they employed many hostile tactics to oppose the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They ran a smear campaign against him. They mocked him. They ridiculed him, and they made physical threats to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They threw the intestines of the animals, the slaughtered animals on his back when he was praying in Kaaba. So they did so much to Rasulullah. They tried to torture him in many ways. They got 2 of his daughters, alayhi salatu wassalam, they got them divorced without any reason, because they were married to one of the two sons of one of the chieftains in Makkah. They told him just to divorce them. So many, all kinds of torture, physical and mental, they tried to give to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then we see that when Amul Huzn happened, when Sayyidina Abu Talib and Sayyidina Khadijatul Kubra radiyallahu ta'ala anha, they both died in 1 year, which is called the year of sorrow. This is 10th year of Makkan life. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he went to Taif, and unfortunately the Taif was another big center, because Quran has used the word Qaryatain. One Qarya is Wahid, and Qaryatain, two cities, metropolitan cities. One was Makkah, one was Taif. It is around 80 kilometers from Makkah. But he didn't get a good response. We see that he was pelted with stones, and then he came back. So this was the time when this surah was revealed. There is one verse in this surah which, always the Makkans said that show us some miracle, and then we will accept. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is answering that even if such a Quran was revealed that could move the mountains or destroy the earth, this is the verse of this surah. Even if such a Quran was revealed that could move the mountains or destroy the earth or make dead speak, even then they will not believe. This is like someone bukman umyun fahum la yarjiun. They have been given so many arguments that they are not going to believe. They're just mocking. They're just trying to, get their attention away from this message. They're not serious in this discussion. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving the example that even if I send a Quran which can move the mountains and the dead people speak, even then they are not going to believe. So this is the state of the mind of Makkans at that time. This is a most beautiful verse in this Quran. We know that verse very well. That there is a verse, the translation is, Allah does not change the condition of people until they change what is in themselves. Iqbal, the Allama Iqbal, खुदा ने आज तक उस कौम की हालत नहीं बदली ना हो जिसको ख्याल आप अपनी हालत के बदलने का. This is the mere translation of this verse. So this is the verse of Surah Mubarakah Rahad. This is Quran. Allah will never change the condition of the people who do not want to change themselves. Change only comes from within the people. It is pointless to resist worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are different verses in different paragraphs, 4-5 verses, they give one meaning. Then another principle Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described in this surah with an example. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the things which are beneficial to the humankind, they remain forever. Yusbitu. And the things which are just like the froth, they're nothing, the mere meaningless things, they just go away. So the things which make sense, which are useful for the humanity, they remain forever. And the things which are of no value, they perish, they vanish. Like you see the froth in the sea, big, you see them, there are mountains of froth, but one wind comes, blows them away. But on the other hand, the valuable things, they remain. This is survival of the fittest. This theory, Quran describes the theory of the struggle for existence and survival of the fittest. These two principles, they also come from these verses. Another thing that we want to get the peace in our heart. That is the goal of every person. Whether you want to be successful in this world, you want to make a lot of money, you want to get the status, cars, this and that, whatever. You want to get the ultimate success is that you want to be peace. You want to feel peace in your heart. You want to feel cool. You want to feel peaceful. Then Allah gives the principle that nothing other than zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you cannot be at peace in this world unless you do the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and forget everything else. That this verse is also in this surah. Allah, very famous surah, very famous verse. Allah bi zikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. It's not that you satisfy your hearts with zikr. No, this is not the translation. Allah bi zikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. There is nothing else other than the zikr which can give peace to your heart. It is nothing other than the zikr which can give peace to your heart. And we all know this. And then there are two other principles Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described in this surah. Man yudlilillahu fama lahu min hadin. Whoever is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in dalal, in gumrahi, nobody else can find a guide for him. So it is only Allah who gives the guidance. So we should always look forward and ask Allah's guidance. Wallahu yahkumu la mu'aqqiba li hukmihi. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides something to happen, there is no authority on this earth or anywhere which can mu'aqqib. Mu'aqqib means comes back. Aqibai, he can return it. Nothing can return it. These are the few principles. Last surah is Surah Ibrahim. Today's tilawat. This talks about second last ruku talks about the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. The famous dua, Rabbi ja'alni muqimus salati wa min zurriyati. Rabbana wa taqabbal dua, Rabbana aghfir li wa li walidayya wal mu'minina yawma yaqumul hisab. This will come in this surah. But that's why this is called Surah Ibrahim. But as I mentioned in the beginning, no surah talks about the life. We see Surah Ibrahim and we expect that this surah will talk about where Ibrahim alayhi salatu was born, how did he grow up, how did he preach, what happened to his nation, and then what is the end of the story. That is only Surah Yusuf. The only surah in Quran which describes the full story, the whole story, is only Surah Yusuf. The rest is just, the surahs have been named after, in one section, one ruku, there is a mention of one of the prophets. So you call it Surah Ibrahim, Surah Nuh, Surah Hud. But most of the topics they are discussed, they are like different, miscellaneous topics have been discussed. Same is the case with Surah Ibrahim. This surah also revealed same time right after the Surah Mubarakah Rahat. So last 2 years of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this also talks about mostly this surah talks about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and why you should not worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This surah says that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you all the sustenance and all the provisions of life, then how dare you are, what kind of thinking you have, that how come you do not worship Allah? That is, if you really translate this, is how come you don't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He created you, He provided you everything, He will continue to provide, intellectually, physically, then how come you don't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is the one theme, and the surah ends with as I said, with the prayers of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, and his prayer is that he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I have brought my family wadi and ghayr zizara. This is a wadi where there is no cultivation, there is no land, there is no agriculture here. But I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you save my generations from worshipping idols, and you put the love of the people, you put the love for them, for my generations, in the hearts of the people. and you know that we see all the time. I just came from Makkah. There are so many people come, and you look at their faces, and you understand the meaning of the Quran's word kullu fajr amik. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Hajj and says that people will come from every nook and corner. Kullu fajr amik. Amik means deep down. So you look at the different nationalities, and you're really amazed to see the people are coming from nook and corner of the world. So this is really the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam is accepted. That you see so many provisions there, everything is there, and people are flooding there. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq that we learn the lesson from these stories, and we see that unless you know the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam really well in a chronological order, that what happened in what year of life, there is no way you can understand Quran. That's how the Rasulullah sallam, how the Sahib Quran is connected to the Quran. You cannot understand Quran at all. Whatever intellect you have, people came all over the world, the rationalists, Mu'tazila, and today we know many Mu'tazila, they appear on the TV screens, and they talk about from the rational, from the literal meaning of the words. There is no way you can understand Quran unless you know the seerah of the Prophet in detail. So may Allah give us tawfiq that we correlate the Quran with the seerah of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala khair khalqihi Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
Allah